What's going on, guys? Mackenzie Long here. So, what should we do while we're waiting for those things that we're praying for? It's really what we're going to be talking about today. So, one of the biggest challenges I see people face and that I have faced myself is that we're waiting for what we're praying for, but we might not necessarily be participating in that outcome while we're waiting for that to happen. What I mean by that is that while we're praying for something and while we're hoping for something to happen, what is it that we're actually doing up until that happens? And this is very important because it will determine if we're ready or when we're ready to actually receive what it is that we're asking for. And one of the great things, or one of the biggest blessings, is that things don't normally come the way that we pray for them or we ask for them to happen. And that's usually a good thing, because if it happened the way that we wanted it to happen, it probably wouldn't be very good anyway. But there is this period of time between when we ask for it or when something's been revealed to us, maybe we've been called to do something, and then there's a big period of time, and this particular amount of time varies, and then there's when it actually happens. And it's in this block of time that oftentimes people get lost, or people don't really know what to do, and it changes the outcome of what they would actually receive or when they would actually receive it. And you can see this reflected in just about every area of life. It could be with our money, it could be with our workout routine, it could be with looking for a spouse, it could be about our business, or just about anything else out there where we've been given this great vision or this idea of what we're supposed to be doing or who we're supposed to be with or how we're going to do something. And we are looking at that and we can see the picture in our mind of what that's supposed to be like, but yet we feel so far away, and we can oftentimes be so disappointed, especially after waiting what can feel like a really long time, and this hasn't come yet. And normally what people do is they lose their way. And I want to talk about and really get specific about what to be doing in that period of time, because this is where most people get lost. And if you can see that for yourself before it actually happens, maybe you can prevent yourself from actually getting lost and staying the course. And I think that's really important to understand, because we've all been in that position where, probably the best way to describe it is that you just lose faith. And the reason why all of this came up was I had a chance to do an interview with Kurt Warner, we did, and so there were a lot of questions that were asked, and there were some great insights to some of those things. And if you don't know who Kurt Warner is, maybe you're not a football player, just go watch the movie The American Underdog, and you'll get a pretty good understanding of who this guy is and some of his background. And Kurt kind of had some of the same problem, once he kind of figured this out, things started to really change and move in his life. And much like Kurt, he made a decision to do something. He wanted to go play football. And while he was playing football, he, at least from the movie projection of it and some of the things that we got a chance to talk to him about, was that he wasn't really all that focused on it. He wasn't that excited about doing it. He wasn't putting all of his time and effort into it. So even though his idea or his goal was to play in the NFL, he wasn't acting like it, because he was waiting to act like he was in the NFL once he was actually in the NFL. And if I'm relating to you at all and you're understanding what I'm saying, we oftentimes do this in our life where maybe we're single and we want to be with somebody, we want to be married and have a good and strong relationship. But there's a period of time, there's things that have to happen in between, and how we handle that time, much like Kurt found out, is that if we don't handle that time well, we can actually lose that vision and the ability to have that dream at the end. Imagine the difference between him giving all of his time and effort to make sure he's in the NFL versus him just kind of being there and participating and hoping that he makes it into the NFL. There's a big difference in the way that we act and our mindset when we're working as if something's going to happen, we just don't know when, and when we're not sure if it's going to happen, we just hope that it will. And one of the best quotes that my mentors and that I've read or I've heard people say is that the vast majority of people expect to lose but they hope that they get lucky and they win. Which is exactly this mentality that we're talking about now, is that they don't believe that they're actually going to be successful at most of the things they do. So the way they act, the way they work towards that goal is assuming that it's not going to work out anyway. So imagine if you treated a relationship that way, or you treated a business that way, or your workout goals in the idea that I'm never going to reach the goal that I have anyway, so why should I really strain myself? Why should I get up uncomfortable? Why should I do those things? Why should I wake up early or stay up late to make sure I get my workout in? Why would I be sore? And if we're not really willing to answer those questions and believe that we can actually have it, then our ability to work towards it is not going to be the same effort as if we actually believed we were going to get it and it was just a matter of time. And this is kind of where Kurt found himself. He had gotten the chance to play some football. He ended up getting some tryouts for some major teams, but he wasn't acting as if he was really prepared and he really wanted to do it. But one of the great things that I heard him talking about was he was living his life, once he made that decision, he was living his life in a way that allowed him to come into the NFL and be one of the best quarterbacks. He will end up in the Hall of Fame with that entire team, or with some of the guys from that team that he actually played with. And that's something that's really special that most people cannot say. There's lots of people that end up going into the NFL and will never actually be in the Hall of Fame. So what Kurt did outside of football really made the difference. And I want you to understand this and relate it to your situation, that what you do when the spotlight is not on you allows you to be prepared once it actually is. Kurt put himself into a position where he was ready, and then once the leading quarterback that he was backup to got hurt, he was able to step up into that role and then become the fantastic quarterback that he could be. The challenge is when the vast majority of us, when those spotlights are not on, we tend to not perform and prepare the same way as if the spotlight is on us. And what I mean by that is that while we're single, we're acting differently than when we're actually in a relationship and we're married. And then the challenge becomes you find that right person, but you're not in the right position to actually accept it and excel with it. So the reason why this is so important, and one of my friends just had a recent conversation with this around a social media platform, and she's like, well, I'm really in this weird spot where I want to be in a relationship, but I don't really know anybody who's in the position to be in a relationship with me the way that I want to be in a relationship. And my response to her, as it would be to anybody who's watching this, is that you should keep acting or becoming that person that you think a man would want to have in a woman. What are those qualities? How can you keep developing yourself into being that person, that woman that a man would want to marry? And oftentimes we get this confused. A lady would go, well, because I'm single, I can do whatever I want, and then I'll get right once I find the right guy. The challenge is you're going to end up in a bunch of different scenarios where that guy that you're looking for isn't going to see you as a potential partner because you've been doing all of these other things. So you're looking for Mr. Right, but you're doing all of these other weird things that don't lead you to a position where you would actually find that person. And I can speak from personal experience here because that's how it was with Marlene. I was acting as if I was married. I was acting as if I wanted to be in a position to do that. I was developing myself. I was learning more about communication. I was learning more about money and finances and relationships and all of those things. I was developing and learning those skills before we had met, so that when we met, I was more prepared and I was able to handle a lot of those things and understand personality traits and differences between people and communication skills, so that when we got together, A, I knew what I was looking for, but B, I also knew how to come to the middle. I knew how to understand what it was she was trying to say, even if she didn't have the right words to do it. I'm not talking just because she's bilingual, but she oftentimes we try to say something. I'm sure you've had a conversation like this, right? Where you're saying everything and that person is not hearing what you're saying. And you end up having these arguments over and over again because you're trying to relay how you feel about something, and that other person is talking as well. You're speaking, but you're not communicating. It's not impacting. That other person isn't understanding what you're actually saying, or you're not understanding what they're saying. And those skills can be developed much like anything else. And I see this in the business world as well, where we will go through a scripting class or what to say to people, or develop these different skills. How do you communicate better with other people? How do you do whatever it is that we might be working on? And the challenge is the new business owner doesn't practice any of this stuff until they have an appointment set up, and then they want to practice when they're in front of somebody. And this is the mentality that I think causes most people to fail, that they're going to start acting right once they're in the relationship. They're going to practice the words of their business and how to do the business and learn their products once they have somebody sitting in front of them. And I just think that's a poor way to handle business, because most people can't survive that, in that they're not going to find that person or be in that right position for their business because they're waiting until they're in the spotlight. And I try to relate this with sports. It would almost be as if they don't ever go to practice, but yet they show up for the game, and then they want to be the best at the game, but they never put any of the time to be the best. And we can call that whatever we want to call it. We can fault that on the millennial generation. I don't think it's just them, it's everybody. The difference is you take a Kobe Bryant or a Michael Jordan or any great professional of the things that we love, they practice 95% of the time. 95% of their time is spent in practice. Maybe 5% of their time is actually spent in the game. Whereas what I think most people do is the exact opposite. They spend 95% of their time in their game, and they might practice 5%. So the difference is huge, because once the game happens, if you've already been practicing 95% of your time in practice, and now you're in the game, you've done that hundreds or thousands of times, versus the person who spends 95% of their time practicing in the game. They haven't developed the skills well enough that when they're competing with other people and they get into that environment, they just can't execute the same way that somebody who can practice or has been practicing so much more. So what are those areas in your life? And I want to challenge you to do this. And I oftentimes use the 5 F's. And if you haven't hit the like button by now, you should. It's for one of the 5 F's. We'll go through those in just a second. And if you haven't hit the subscribe, definitely do that as well. But in talking about the 5 F's, there's faith, and this is my particular order, you can pick yours: faith, family, finances, fitness, and fun. And those are the 5 areas that I use to run my life. And so I'm practicing and I'm getting better in all of these areas all the time. The challenge is when we stop learning and growing or developing in those areas. Like, one of the biggest things I see on the financial side is people say, well, when I have a lot of money, then I will actually start taking care of it. I'll start tithing. I'll start actually saving once I have a bunch of money. Once my income goes up to where I have so much, then I'll start taking care of it. And my question is, or oftentimes when I ask about it, they say, well, if you're not faithful with the small amount, what makes you think you're going to be faithful with the big amount? If you're unfaithful in your relationships now, how can you expect to have a great relationship later? Because you're going to resort back to what you know. And if you're not being faithful in your relationships, and I'm not just saying necessarily with sex, but I'm talking about maybe with money, maybe with the way you communicate, maybe with your time. So if you can't get that straight now, how do you expect to have it to be great later? So that's what we can be working on, and probably should be working on in the meantime. That if you're hoping your financial life is going to be better, there are steps along the way that you can do to make it better. And by the way, cheap plug, right? Just put it in. If you haven't ordered your book already, you should. I just did a whole playlist. You should go check out around this book and how money works. It doesn't replace the book, but it's some great things to add to the book. And you can order this book on Amazon. It's the #1 bestseller. It's the only book, not just the only personal finance book, that has been on TV over 250 times. I actually just got back from the author's house and I spent some time with him learning more about the book and what his goals and plans are around this. I've also met Steve Siebold and Annie Horner. Annie Horner was there as well. And I highly recommend this. They basically took 40 years of financial professional experience, 40 years of mindset development, and a bunch of years with Andy Horner in developing communication skills through visuals. They tied the three of those together, and that's how they developed this book, How Money Works. And I highly recommend it. You can get it on Amazon. It's like 26 bucks. Or if you want, if I have any extras, I can't promise you that I do, because we're coming up towards the end of August of our Booked Up event. But if I have a couple laying around, if you fill out the MailChimp link down below, I'll put the Amazon link down below as well. Yeah, you can hit that, fill out that information, and myself or somebody on our team will reach out to you and see if we can get you that book. If I have one, I will send it to you. So make sure you do that as well. And the same thing is going to be true if we're talking about developing our personal life or our business. That your ability to get good in the off season, in the off time, while you're waiting for what it is that you're expecting, if you can build the skills, then in my personal opinion, my personal experience, you will be given those things and be given those things in greater quantity because you've developed yourself to a point where you can actually handle it. Learning how to save when you're not making a lot of money is more important, or just as important, as learning how to save once you actually are making a bunch of money. And the reason for that is because you can't out-earn bad decisions. You can't out-earn your financial illiteracy. It just means you will have more money and more money to lose. And I can tell you that from over 9 years of experience in the financial industry and working with people who are multi-millionaires and that make lots of money. The challenge is they just spend more of it. If they're making $1 million a year and they're spending 1.3, it's the same thing as a person who makes $100,000 a year that spends 130. It's the same exact thing, they're just broke on a higher level. So learn those skills, develop in those areas of your life before you actually have it, so when you get it, it's much easier to be prepared to receive it, which is generally the exact opposite of what the vast majority of people do. They ask for something and then they don't work towards getting better at those things, so when they receive it, they can't actually keep it. Let's just take a business example. So let's say you're starting your side hustle, and I'm not saying not to do that, but think about it, or here's what I see in my perspective and here's what I see from my perspective as I'm training people. So let's say we have the ability to get on a call twice a week for maybe a half hour, an hour. Now, if I leave them after that half hour, an hour, and we get back together a half week later, and they've made no progress of what we've talked about, and the last time that they go back and review those notes of what, or they worked on any of those things, that half a week later, and they're expecting to only learn when I'm there, that's a huge challenge, and it's going to take them forever. If they, just imagine if you were putting in 5 hours a week, if we need to hit that 10,000 hour mark to become a professional at something, like people come in, they go, well, I want to make millions of dollars a year. I want to make multiple six figures. That's what professionals make. Right? It's our industry, the financial industry. Professionals make really, really good money here, probably in whatever industry you are as well. But those people are professionals. You want to make that same amount, but not have put in any other work or effort. So what is it you're doing in the off times? After we get off our call, are you practicing those scripts? Are you practicing and thinking about those things? Are you working on people who maybe you can do some kind of business stuff with? Are you working and thinking about moving your business forward? Or are you just waiting until the next time we meet to not even complete the instructions from the last time we talked? And that's really the difference between whether somebody becomes successful or not. So if you find yourself doing that, maybe you have a coach or mentor right now and they're guiding you to do something and you're not taking any action until the next time you meet them, just understand it's perfectly normal if that mentor doesn't want to mentor you anymore. Because why would they waste their breath waiting for you to do stuff when there's plenty of people who are willing to take their advice and actually apply it? And if you're only putting in 5 hours a week and you've got to hit that 10,000 hour mark to become a professional, that's going to take you over 2,000 hours, which means it's going to be over 38 years before you become a professional. Now, the only way you can shortcut that is by doing more time faster. That's really the only way, that's the shortcut to be able to do it. So you've got to be able to practice and work on things when the spotlight is not on you. That's going to be true in all of those areas. It's going to be true in your faith. How do you get stronger with your faith? You start putting yourself in positions where it requires you to have faith. How do you start getting better with your family? You put yourself in positions where you need to do better with your family. How do you get better with your finances? You put yourself in position where you get better with your finances or your health. How do you get stronger? You put yourself in position where you've got to build up resistance and muscle so that you can get better in those areas. How do you have fun? Well, you start figuring out what it is that's actually fun for you, and not because your friends like to do it, but because you like to do it. And the only way you can figure those things out is sitting down and designing the life that you want. What do you actually want out of life? And then what will happen is you'll start finding ways to get there. Now, you might not find the way to get there, but you're going to start taking steps in the right direction. The challenge with not having a plan and not having a goal is that any direction will work for you, even the wrong direction. So are you actually getting closer to where you want to go if you're just aimlessly walking around? In most cases, no. So what this is doing is this is defining what you want out of life in those 5 areas, and then you just start walking towards it, so that way when that relationship comes, you're ready. That when you start making more money, you're ready. When your faith is tested, you're ready. All of those things are going to be what you do in the off hours, not what you're doing when it's actually game time. And your ability to understand that and implement that will change everything about all of the aspects of your life that you apply it to. And this is really, to bring it back to Kurt Warner's, what he talked about in how he handled a lot of things in his life, is that he didn't know what was actually going to happen, but he kept working towards those goals. Most of the time when people get out of the NFL, if they don't get drafted, they're not practicing, they're not keeping up with their game, they're not doing those things that would allow them to get back into the NFL. They just immediately change direction and go in to do something else that they may or may not really want to do. So your ability to stay focused and start working towards the goal, and I think this just comes down to faith. Do you have enough faith that your God is going to lead you to where you actually want to go? And if you don't, then there's something there that you need to ask yourself and figure out. Why don't you have enough faith that you've been given this vision of what the future is supposed to look like, but you're not willing to start taking the action to actually end up there? So I hope this was helpful for you in being able to determine some of those things and to know what to do while you're waiting for what you're praying for. If it did help you and you haven't already, make sure you smash that like button and also hit the subscribe as well. And if you hit the subscribe button or you filled out the link for the How Money Works, make sure you put a comment down below. I would like to actually meet you in person and just say hi. And if there's anything that I can do to help, don't hesitate to reach out and make a comment about. All right, guys, I'll catch you later.